The December wind cut through Prescott Valley like a blade made of ice and regret. Garrett Finch rode his horse through the skeletal remains of winter brush, tracking a wounded deer through 2 inches of fresh snow. His breath hung in the air, small clouds of warmth that disappeared as quickly as they formed. The tracks led him away from Copper Ridge Ranch down toward Willow Creek, where the water still ran despite the freeze. 3 years. 3 years since Ruby died, and still the ranch felt like a tomb he couldn't escape. The land remembered her better than he did now. Every fence post she'd helped him set. Every tree she'd watered during the drought of 1881. The garden plot where she'd grown vegetables that actually tasted like something other than dust and determination. Garrett shook his head, pushing the memories down where they belonged. Buried. The deer tracks veered left deeper into the cottonwood grove. Blood spatter on the snow told him the animal wouldn't make it much farther. A clean kill would have been kinder, but his shot had been off, just like everything else in his life lately. The creek came into view, its surface partially frozen, the water beneath, moving slow and dark. And that's when Garrett saw her. A woman lay half in the water, half on the snowy bank. Her dark hair spread around her like ink, bleeding into white paper. Blood stained the snow in patterns too deliberate to be accidental. This wasn't a fall. This was violence. Garrett dismounted fast, his boots crunching through ice as he rushed to her side. She wore traditional Apache clothing, the deerskin dress torn and soaked. Multiple stab wounds crossed her abdomen and shoulders. Her skin had gone the gray color that meant she was close to the end, but her eyes opened. They fixed on him with an intensity that stopped his breath. Brown eyes deep and desperate, trying to communicate something more important than pain. Her lips moved. Garrett leaned close, his ear near her mouth. "Ruby," she whispered. The name hit him like a fist to the chest. She knows. The girl knows everything. They'll kill her too. Garrett pulled back, staring at this dying stranger who somehow knew his dead wife's name. "Who's Ruby?" "What girl? What are you talking about?" The woman's hand shot up, grabbing his coat collar with surprising strength. Blood smeared across the fabric. "Your wife didn't fall. They pushed." The world tilted. Garrett's vision narrowed to just her face, her eyes, her bleeding mouth forming words that couldn't be true. "What did you say?" "They pushed her. Off the cliff. My sister saw." Her breath rattled. "The documents." She had the documents. They killed her for them. Who killed her?" Garrett's voice cracked. 3 years he'd believed the sheriff's report. Accidental fall. Ruby riding too close to the canyon edge at night. A tragic mistake. And now this woman, this stranger bleeding out in the snow, was telling him it was murder. Railroad. Drummond. The deputy was there. He watched. Her eyes started to lose focus. "Find my sister, Ayanna. She knows. She saw everything. Where is she? Where's your sister?" But the woman's hand went slack. Her eyes rolled back. Garrett pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. Still there. Faint, irregular, but there. He looked around the creek bed. Boot prints everywhere, partially filled with new snow. Signs of a struggle. Broken branches. Drag marks. Someone had dumped her here to die, left her like garbage. Garrett made a decision that would change everything. He lifted her carefully, trying not to worsen her wounds. She weighed almost nothing, which terrified him more than the blood. He'd carried wounded men during his cavalry days. He knew what it meant when someone felt this light. The body was already giving up. Getting her onto his horse took effort and prayer. She hung limp across the saddle while he mounted behind her, one arm holding her in place. The deer he'd been tracking was forgotten. None of that mattered now. All that mattered was getting her home alive and finding out the truth about Ruby. The ride back to Copper Ridge felt endless. Garrett kept checking to make sure the woman was still breathing, her blood soaked into his coat, warm at first, then cooling in the winter air. She muttered sometimes incoherent fragments in a language he didn't understand. Apache words mixed with English, names he couldn't catch. His mind raced. Ruby didn't fall. They pushed her. The deputy watched. 3 years ago, Ruby had been acting strange in the weeks before she died. Secretive, riding out at odd hours, meeting people she wouldn't talk about. He'd asked her once if everything was all right, and she'd smiled that smile that made him fall in love with her 14 years earlier. "Everything's fine, Garrett. I'm just helping a friend, nothing to worry about." He'd believed her because he'd trusted her, because he'd been too busy with the ranch to press harder, because he'd been a fool. And then the sheriff had come to the door with his hat in his hands, and his eyes on the ground telling Garrett that Ruby's horse had come back alone, that they'd found her body at the bottom of Mesa Canyon, that it looked like she'd ridden too close to the edge in the dark. Garrett had barely heard the rest, something about the ground being unstable, about how these things happened, about how sorry everyone was. The funeral had been a blur. Pearl, only 7 years old, hadn't cried. She just stood there holding Garrett's hand, staring at the coffin with eyes too old for her age. She hadn't spoken much after that day. Not to strangers, barely to him. The ranch house came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney. May Wong would be inside preparing the evening meal. Pearl would be in her room reading or drawing, the same quiet routine they'd followed for 3 years. Garrett guided his horse to the front porch and called out, "May, I need help." The door burst open. May Wong, her gray-streaked hair coming loose from its usual tight bun, took one look at the blood and ran back inside. She returned seconds later with blankets and her medical kit. "What happened?" May's hands were already checking the woman's wounds, her face grim. "Found her at Willow Creek. Stabbed. She's Apache." Garrett carefully lowered the woman into May's arms. "She said something about Ruby before she passed out." May's eyes snapped to his face. "Ruby! She said Ruby didn't fall, said she was pushed." May's expression went carefully blank. The look she got when she was hiding something. "Get her inside. We'll talk after I stop the bleeding." They carried the woman to the guest room, the one that hadn't been used since Ruby's sister visited 5 years ago. May worked quickly, cutting away the ruined dress, exposing the full extent of the damage. 4 stab wounds. One had nicked something internal. May packed them with clean cloth, her movements efficient despite her age. Garrett stood in the doorway, useless and restless. "Will she live?" "Don't know yet. Lost a lot of blood. Next few hours will tell." May didn't look up from her work. "Go fetch Doc Patterson if you want to improve her chances." "Can't. Storm's coming in. We'd never make it to town and back before dark." Garrett ran a hand through his hair. "We do what we can here." May nodded already, threading a needle. "Then make yourself useful. Boil more water, and keep Pearl away from this room." Too late. Garrett turned to find his daughter standing in the hallway. Pearl Finch, 10 years old, wearing one of Ruby's old shawls wrapped around her thin shoulders. Her curly brown hair hung loose, and her hazel eyes, so like his own, stared past him at the woman on the bed. "Pearl, go back to your room." Pearl didn't move. She walked forward, her steps deliberate, until she stood beside the bed. May tried to block her view, but Pearl was already looking, staring at the unconscious woman with an expression Garrett couldn't read. "Pearl!" His voice came out sharper than he intended. "I said go." Pearl's mouth opened. For a moment, Garrett thought she might actually speak. She so rarely did anymore. But instead, she turned and ran from the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. May glanced at him. "That girl sees more than she should. Story of her life," Garrett muttered. Night fell like a curtain dropping. The storm May had predicted arrived with force, battering the ranch house with wind and sleet. Garrett sat in the main room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He hadn't drunk in 6 months, had promised Pearl he'd stop. But tonight, the need for numbness was stronger than promises. He stared at the amber liquid, watching the firelight play through it. Ruby's face appeared in his memory, laughing at some joke he'd told. The way she'd looked the morning she died, kissing Pearl goodbye before riding out. The last words she'd said to him. "I'll be back before supper. Don't let Pearl eat all the cornbread." She'd never come back. Garrett raised the glass to his lips, then stopped, set it down untouched. If that woman survived the night, if she could tell him who killed Ruby, he needed to be sharp, sober, ready. May emerged from the guest room, wiping her hands on a cloth. "She's stable. For now. Stitched what I could. The rest is up to her." "Did she say anything?" "Fever talk. Nothing useful." May sat down across from him, her eyes tired. "Garrett, what did she tell you at the creek?" He repeated it all. The deputy watching. The railroad. Someone named Drummond. documents Ruby supposedly had, a sister who witnessed everything. May listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I wondered when this would come back." Garrett's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "Ruby was involved in something. The last few months before she died." May's voice was careful. "She asked me questions about the Apache families that used to live north of here, the ones that disappeared 5 years back. And you didn't think to tell me this. She made me promise. Said it was safer if you didn't know." May met his eyes. "Said if anything happened to her, I should protect Pearl. Not you, Pearl." The words hung between them. Garrett felt something cold settle in his chest. She knew they might kill her. "I think she hoped it wouldn't come to that." May stood moving to the fireplace. "But she was scared. The night before she died, she came to me, gave me a letter. Said if anything happened, I should give it to Pearl when she turned 18. Where is it?" "The letter. Hidden. Safe. And it stays that way until Pearl's 18, just like Ruby wanted." May's tone left no room for argument. "That woman in there, if she lives, she might have answers. But Garrett, you need to be careful. If Ruby was killed for knowing something, you could be next. Let them try." The anger in his voice surprised him. 3 years of grief crystallizing into something harder, sharper. "I want to know who did this. I want to know why. And I want them to pay." May studied him. "That's not grief talking anymore. That's rage." "Good." The woman woke 2 days later. Garrett was sitting beside her bed reading one of Pearl's books to pass the time when her eyes opened. She stared at the ceiling disoriented, then her gaze found him. Recognition flickered across her face. You're the one who found me." "Garrett Finch. This is my ranch." He set the book aside. "You've been out for 2 days. May, my housekeeper, patched you up. Doc Patterson came yesterday. Says you'll live if infection doesn't set in." She tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "How bad?" "4 stab wounds, 1 deep. You lost a lot of blood." Garrett leaned forward. "You said things at the creek. About my wife. About her being pushed. I need you to tell me everything you know." The woman's eyes searched his face. "Your wife. What was her name?" "Ruby Finch." Something broke in the woman's expression. Grief, recognition, guilt, all mixed together. Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what?" "Did you know her?" "No, but my sister did." The woman took a shaky breath. "My name is Naya Taza. 3 years ago, my sister Ayanna was running from men who killed our family. Your wife found her, hid her, tried to save her." Garrett's throat tightened. "What happened?" "The men found them. There was a fight. Ruby got Ayanna out, told her to run. But Ruby," Naya's voice cracked, "Ruby didn't make it out. They killed her. Made it look like an accident." The room spun. Garrett gripped the edge of the bed to steady himself. "Your sister saw this. She saw them kill Ruby. She saw them throw her off the cliff. She heard them talking after, about how the railroad man would be pleased, about how they'd finally shut her up. Who did this? I don't know all their names, but Ayanna described one, a deputy. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing a badge." Naya met his eyes. He stood and watched. Didn't try to stop it, just watched. Marcus Holt. The description fit Marcus Holt, the deputy who'd helped investigate Ruby's death, who'd stood at the funeral with a somber face and offered condolences. Garrett stood abruptly, needing to move before the rage consumed him. "Where's your sister now? I need to talk to her." "I don't know. That's why I came here." Naya struggled to sit up despite the pain. "Ayanna's been hiding for 3 years. She has documents, proof of what the railroad did, proof of the murders. She was supposed to meet me 3 days ago at a camp north of here, but when I arrived the camp was destroyed. Signs of a fight, blood, but no body. So she could be alive. She could be. Or they finally caught her." Naya's hands clenched into fists. "I've been searching for her for 3 years, following rumors, tracking signs. 3 days ago I got close, too close. That's when they came for me." "Who stabbed you?" "Hired men, 4 of them. I killed 2 before they got me down." No apology in her voice, just fact. "Thought they'd finish it, but I heard horses coming. They ran, left me to bleed out." Garrett processed this. "You said Ayanna has documents. What kind of documents?" "Land titles, deeds, proof that the railroad has been stealing Apache land using forged papers, Proof that they murdered families who refused to leave. Naya's eyes burned with intensity. My people's land was legally recognized by treaty in 1878. The government promised us protection. The railroad ignored it. When we wouldn't sell, they killed us and forged documents saying we'd agreed to relocate. And Ruby found out about this, not just found out, she was helping us prove it. Naya leaned back against the pillows, exhausted from talking. Ayanna said Ruby was the only white person who listened, who believed us, who was willing to stand up to the railroad. Garrett thought of his wife, sweet, gentle Ruby who wouldn't hurt a fly, who taught Pearl to read using Bible verses about kindness and mercy. That Ruby had been fighting a railroad company, risking her life to help strangers. He'd never really known her at all. The door creaked open. May stood there with a tray of food, but her eyes were on the hallway behind her. "Garrett, you need to see this." He followed her gaze. Pearl stood in the hallway, pressed against the wall, clearly having listened to everything. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. In her hands she clutched a piece of paper covered in childish drawings. "Pearl, I told you to stay in your room." Pearl shook her head. She walked forward past Garrett straight to Naya's bedside. She held out the drawing. Naya took it with trembling hands. The image showed two women, one with yellow hair, one with black. They stood in front of a building. Flames surrounded them. A small figure, clearly Pearl, watched from behind a tree. "You drew this?" Naya whispered. Pearl nodded. When Pearl held up 7 fingers, then pointed to the yellow-haired woman and touched her own chest. "Mother." Garrett felt his blood turn to ice. "Pearl, what is this? What are you saying?" Pearl looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in 3 years. She opened her mouth. Garrett held his breath, hoping, praying she'd speak. "I saw," Pearl whispered. Her voice was rusty from disuse, barely audible. "I saw Mama." The words hung in the air like smoke. Naya stared at the drawing, then at Pearl. "You were there the night your mother died." Pearl nodded, tears streaming down her face. Garrett knelt beside his daughter, his hands shaking. "Pearl, baby, what do you mean you were there? You were here, at home, with May." Pearl shook her head violently. She pointed at the drawing again, at the small figure behind the tree. "I followed. Mama didn't know. I wanted to see where she went at night." The room fell silent, except for the crackle of the fire in the hearth. May's hand flew to her mouth. Naya gripped the drawing like a lifeline, and Garrett felt his entire world restructure itself around this revelation. His daughter, 7 years old, had followed her mother that night, had watched Ruby die, had carried this secret for 3 years. "Pearl," his voice broke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Pearl's tears fell faster. "I tried. I drew pictures. I told the sheriff. He said I was making stories. Said little girls have nightmares after their mama dies. Nobody believed me." Garrett pulled her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed. All this time he'd thought she'd gone silent from grief, but it was more than that. It was the weight of a truth nobody would hear, the burden of being a witness with no voice. "I believe you," he whispered into her hair. "I believe you now. I'm sorry I didn't before." Over Pearl's shoulder he saw Naya watching them. Her face showed understanding, sympathy, and something else, recognition. "Your daughter," Naya said quietly. "She saw my sister." Pearl pulled back from Garrett and nodded. She pointed at the black-haired woman in the drawing. "She ran, into the trees. Mama told her to run." "And the men," Naya's voice was gentle. "Did you see the men who hurt your mama?" Pearl nodded again. She turned the paper over. On the back she'd drawn 4 figures. 3 were rough sketches, but one was detailed. A man with a badge, clean-shaven, tall, Deputy Marcus Holt. Garrett felt something cold and final settle in his chest. The man who'd investigated Ruby's death. The man who'd told Garrett it was an accident. The man who'd patted Pearl on the head at the funeral and said her mama was in heaven now. That man had watched Ruby die. "Pearl," Garrett said carefully, "did this man, the one with the badge, did he hurt Mama?" Pearl shook her head. "He watched." The other men pushed her. "He just watched." Worse. Somehow that was worse. Active participation could be explained by evil, by madness. But standing by and watching, that was a choice. A conscious decision to let murder happen. Naya spoke, her voice hard. "The man who watched. Do you know his name?" "Marcus Holt," Garrett answered. "Deputy Marcus Holt. He's been working in Prescott for 6 years. Respected, trusted. People like him. He's a coward, Naya said. A coward and an accomplice. May, who'd been silent through all this, finally spoke. If Holt was there, then this goes deeper than we thought. The railroad must have law enforcement in their pocket. Garrett stood, his mind racing. 3 years. Holt had been walking around free for 3 years, while Garrett grieved and Pearl carried her terrible secret, while this woman Naya hunted for her sister, while justice rotted away in silence. We need a plan, he said. We need to find Ayanna first, Naya countered. Without those documents, we have nothing but the word of a child and a half-dead Apache woman. They'll never believe us. Where do we start looking? Pearl's drawing, Naya said. The building with the flames. Where is that? Pearl walked to the window, pointing north. Old barn, by the big rocks. Garrett knew the place. An abandoned barn on the northern edge of his property near a rock formation locals called the Sisters. He'd avoided that area since Ruby died. Too many memories of picnics there when Pearl was small. That's where it happened, he asked his daughter. Pearl nodded. Then that's where we start. Garrett looked at Naya. Soon as you can ride, we go there. See if your sister left any sign of where she went. I can ride now, Naya said, already trying to swing her legs out of bed. Like hell you can. May pushed her back down. You've been awake for 20 minutes. You'll tear your stitches and bleed out before you make it to the barn. My sister could be dying while we wait, and you'll definitely be dying if you go now, May shot back. Give it 2 days. Eat, rest, heal, then you can play hero. Naya wanted to argue. Garrett could see it in the set of her jaw, but her body betrayed her sagging back against the pillows with exhaustion. 2 days, Garrett agreed. We use that time to prepare, gather supplies. Figure out what we're really dealing with. Pearl tugged on his sleeve. When he looked down, she was holding another drawing. This one showed a man on horseback watching a house from a distance. The house was clearly Copper Ridge Ranch. When did you draw this? Garrett asked, his blood chilling. Pearl held up 3 fingers. 3 days ago. The same day Naya was attacked. Someone's been watching the ranch, May said, voicing what they were all thinking. They know she's here. Naya's hand moved to her side where a knife would normally be sheathed. Found nothing. They'll come back. Garrett walked to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. Snow covered everything in white, pristine, and deceptive. Anyone could be out there, watching, waiting. Let them come, he said. This time, we'll be ready. That night, after Pearl was asleep and May had retired to her room, Garrett sat with Naya in the guest room. She was still too weak to move much, but her mind was sharp. Tell me about Ayanna, Garrett said. What kind of person is she? Naya smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Smart, smarter than me. Our father taught us both to track, to hunt, to survive. But Ayanna, she learned to read and write too, taught herself from books a missionary left behind. How old is she? 26 now. Was 23 when it all happened. The smile faded. She was supposed to marry that spring, a good man from another tribe, but then the railroad came and everything burned. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead. Naya's tone wasn't bitter, just factual. After our parents died, after our village was destroyed, Ayanna and I ran. We thought we could start over somewhere else, but the railroad followed. They wanted to make sure no witnesses survived. That's when she met Ruby. Yes, we'd been running for months. Starving. Exhausted. Ayanna was sick with fever. We stumbled onto your property by accident. Ruby found us near that barn, brought us food, medicine, blankets, asked what we were running from. Naya's eyes grew distant, remembering. Ayanna told her everything. About the murders, the forged documents, the railroad's plan to build through Apache land without proper compensation. Most white people would have turned us in or chased us off, but Ruby, she listened. Really listened. What did she do? She said she'd help. Said she knew a newspaper editor who'd been investigating railroad corruption. Said if we could get proof, real proof, she'd make sure it got to the right people. Naya's voice dropped. She was so sure justice would win, that the truth mattered. It should have, Garrett said quietly, but it didn't. Because 3 nights after she found us, the railroad's men came. Ruby must have been followed. Or maybe someone in town talked, I don't know. All I know is Ayanna woke me up in our camp terrified, saying Ruby was in danger. We ran to the barn, saw the men grabbing her, saw her fight. And Ayanna witnessed it all. She saw them drag Ruby to the cliff edge, saw the deputy stand there doing nothing, saw them throw her over. Naya's voice broke. She would have tried to save Ruby, but I held her back. There were 4 of them armed. We would have died too. So you ran. We ran like cowards, while a woman who'd shown us kindness died. The guilt in Naya's eyes was ancient and deep. Ayanna never forgave herself. She said Ruby died because of us, because she tried to help the wrong people. She died because she tried to help the right people, Garrett corrected, and because evil men killed her for it. That's not your fault or Ayanna's fault. Try telling that to my sister. Naya wiped her eyes. After that night, Ayanna changed, stopped running, started hunting. She tracked down every piece of evidence she could find: land deeds, railroad company records, witness testimonies from other Apache survivors. She built a case piece by piece. For 3 years, living in caves, abandoned buildings, moving every few days so they couldn't find her. She became a ghost. Naya's voice held both pride and sorrow. Last I heard, she'd contacted a newspaper editor in Phoenix, a man named Harrison Wells. He was going to publish everything. What happened? Wells drowned in his bathtub 2 weeks later. They called it an accident. Naya's laugh was bitter. A lot of convenient accidents when it comes to the railroad. Garrett thought about his own convenient accident. Ruby's convenient fall. How many others had there been? How many deaths ruled accidental or natural when they were really murder? This man you mentioned, he said. Drummond. Who is he? Wallace Drummond. He's the railroad's lawyer, but he's more than that. He's their fixer, the man who makes problems disappear. Naya's face hardened. Ayanna has evidence that Drummond personally killed an Apache elder named Red Bear, shot him in the back during a peaceful negotiation meeting, and nobody arrested him. Who would? He has senators in his pocket, judges, lawmen like your Deputy Holt. The railroad brings money, jobs, progress. Nobody wants to believe the cost. Naya met his eyes. That's why the documents matter. They're proof that can't be ignored, proof that even bought judges would have to acknowledge. If we find them. When we find them, Naya corrected. Ayanna's alive. I know she is. She's survived 3 years against men who want her dead. She's not going to die now. Garrett heard the desperation under her certainty, the need to believe. He understood it. He'd spent 3 years telling himself Ruby's death was an accident because believing otherwise would have destroyed him. Now he knew the truth, and the truth was going to destroy someone else. 2 days passed in tense preparation. Naya's strength returned faster than Doc Patterson predicted. May suspected Apache remedies mixed with her medical care, but didn't ask questions. By the second evening, Naya could walk without wincing, though she still favored her left side. Pearl stayed close to Naya, drawn to her in a way that surprised Garrett. His daughter, who barely spoke to anyone, chattered away to the Apache woman in broken Apache words Naya taught her. Simple things: water, sky, horse, family. It was the word family that made Garrett's chest tight. Pearl had lost her mother. Naya had lost everyone but her sister. 2 people shaped by absence, finding something in each other that filled the empty spaces. On the 3rd morning, they prepared to ride out to the barn. Garrett checked his rifle 3 times. May packed food and medical supplies. Pearl insisted on coming despite Garrett's objections. She needs to show us exactly where things happened, Naya pointed out. We're looking for evidence 3 years old. Every detail matters. Garrett couldn't argue with that logic, though everything in him screamed to keep Pearl safe at home. But safe from what? If the railroad knew Naya was here, the ranch was already compromised. At least on the trail they could see danger coming. They rode out under a gray sky that promised more snow. Garrett led, followed by Pearl on her small mare, then Naya on a borrowed horse. May stayed behind with strict instructions to shoot anyone who approached the ranch without an invitation. The journey to the northern edge of the property took 90 minutes through rough terrain. Pearl rode confidently, her small body swaying with the horse's rhythm. She'd been riding since she was 4. Ruby had taught her patient and gentle, making it a game instead of a lesson. Another thing Ruby had given their daughter that Garrett had failed to appreciate until she was gone. The rock formation called the Sisters came into view. 3 tall stone pillars, weathered by wind and time, into shapes that vaguely resembled women in long dresses. The barn sat in their shadow, its roof partially collapsed, its walls leaning at angles that defied gravity. Garrett hadn't been here since before Ruby died. Looking at it now, he could almost see her ghost, laughing as they spread out a picnic blanket, chasing Pearl through the tall grass, alive and whole and his. Pearl dismounted without being told. She walked toward the barn like a sleepwalker, her steps slow and measured. Naya followed her eyes, scanning everything, cataloging details. Garrett tied the horses and caught up to them at the barn entrance. The door hung on one hinge, creaking in the wind. Inside, the space was dim and cold. Old hay rotted in corners. Birds had nested in the rafters. And on the far wall, 3 years of weather hadn't quite erased the dark stain that could only be blood. Pearl pointed at it. Mama was here. The men held her here. Naya approached the stain, examining it closely. They questioned her, wanted to know where Ayanna was hiding. "How do you know?" Garrett asked. "Because that's what they do. That's what they always do." Naya touched the wall. "They hurt her here, then dragged her outside." Pearl led them out the back of the barn through the collapsed rear wall. A trail wound through rocks and scrub brush. They followed it 50 yards to the cliff edge. Prescott Valley spread out below them, beautiful and terrible. The drop was at least 200 feet, sharp rocks at the bottom. No chance of survival. This was where Ruby had died. Garrett stood at the edge, looking down. Somewhere in those rocks his wife had taken her last breath. Alone, in pain, knowing her daughter might have witnessed it. "Papa." Pearl's voice pulled him back. She was kneeling near a cluster of rocks, digging at something. Naya joined her, and together they uncovered a small leather pouch buried shallow. Naya opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a folded piece of paper protected from the weather by oilcloth wrapping. "It's a map," she breathed. Garrett looked over her shoulder. Crude but detailed. A series of landmarks he recognized. The creek, the Sisters, a cave system to the north marked with an X. "Thunder Cave," Naya said. "The sacred place. Ayanna's been hiding there." "You think she's still there?" "Only one way to find out." Naya refolded the map carefully. "We ride north. Tonight." "Tonight? That's 20 miles through winter terrain. Then we'd better hurry." Naya's eyes blazed with hope and fear mixed together. "My sister left this map for someone to find, either for me or for your wife's family. Either way, it means she wanted us to come." Pearl tugged Garrett's sleeve. When he looked down, she was holding something else. A small metal object half buried in dirt. A deputy's badge. Not just any badge. This one had initials scratched into the back. M.H. Marcus Holt. He was here. Garrett said, his voice flat. That night, he was here, and he dropped his badge. Or he left it on purpose, Naya suggested. Insurance. In case the railroad turned on him, he'd have proof he was involved. Leverage. Garrett pocketed the badge, cold metal, against his palm. Proof of betrayal, proof of guilt. We're going to the cave, he decided. But first we're going home. We need more supplies if we're traveling tonight. And I need to write something down, in case we don't come back. The ride back to Copper Ridge was faster urgency driving them. May met them at the door, her face tight with worry. Ryder came by while you were gone, Deputy Holt. Said he needed to speak with you about the Apache woman staying here. Said he'd be back tomorrow with a warrant. Garrett and Naya exchanged looks. How did he know she's here? Garrett asked. I may have mentioned it in town when I bought medical supplies, May admitted. Didn't think it would matter. I'm sorry. Not your fault. Garrett's mind raced. Tomorrow. That gives us tonight to get to the cave, find Ayanna, and get the documents. By the time Holt comes back, we'll have everything we need to expose him. That's assuming we find her, Naya said. Assuming she's alive. Assuming the documents still exist. You got a better plan? Naya smiled grimly. I've been running on assumptions for 3 years. What's one more night? They spent the afternoon preparing. Garrett wrote a letter explaining everything, sealed. It gave it to May with instructions to take it to the newspaper in Phoenix if they didn't return in 3 days. Pearl packed her own saddlebag with fierce determination, ignoring Garrett's suggestions that she stay home. Mama would want me to come, Pearl said. Her voice was getting stronger with use. Mama would want me to help. How could he argue with that? As the sun set, they mounted up again, 3 riders heading into the unknown. A widower seeking truth, an Apache woman seeking her sister, and a 10-year-old girl seeking justice for the mother nobody had believed she'd witnessed die. The last light faded as they left Copper Ridge behind. In the distance, barely visible in the gathering dark, a lone rider sat on a hill, watching them go. Garrett saw him, knew he'd been seen, and didn't care. Let them watch. Let them know something was coming. The time for hiding was over. The time for truth had begun. The night was sharp with cold and the promise of violence. Garrett led them north through terrain that grew rougher with each mile. The horses picked their way carefully over frozen ground, their breath forming clouds in the darkness. Behind him, Pearl rode in silence, her small form wrapped in blankets. Naya brought up the rear, her eyes constantly scanning the landscape for threats. They'd brought Tobias Gray with them. Garrett's ranch hand had appeared just as they were leaving, his weathered face set with determination. At 45, Tobias was the best tracker in 3 counties, half Navajo on his mother's side, and the closest thing Garrett had to a friend in the years since Ruby died. "Heard you were heading into trouble," Tobias had said, checking the rifle slung across his saddle. "Figured you could use another gun." Garrett hadn't argued. 4 riders were better than 3, especially when one was a child and another was still healing from stab wounds. They rode for 3 hours before stopping to rest the horses. The moon hung overhead, 3/4 full, casting silver light across the landscape. Rock formations rose around them like sentinels, their shadows deep and mysterious. Pearl dismounted stiffly, her legs cramped from riding. Naya helped her down, then began stretching her own injured side. The stitches pulled with each movement, but she didn't complain. Garrett had noticed that about her. She carried pain like a familiar burden, something expected rather than surprising. "How much farther?" Tobias asked, offering water from his canteen. Naya consulted the map again, using moonlight to read the landmarks. "Another 2 hours to Thunder Cave, maybe 3 in the dark. We should rest here until dawn," Garrett suggested. "The horses need it. We need it. Every hour we wait is an hour Ayanna might not have." Naya's voice was tight. "And every hour we push these horses is an hour closer to one of them breaking a leg in the dark." Tobias spoke with the authority of someone who knew animals. "Dead horse means a dead rider out here. We rest. 2 hours, then we move." Naya wanted to argue. Garrett could see it in the set of her shoulders, but she nodded, accepting the logic even if she hated it. They made a cold camp. No fire to give away their position. They huddled together against a rock face that blocked some of the wind, sharing dried meat and hard bread from May's provisions. Pearl curled against Garrett's side, her body small and warm. "Tell me about your sister," Pearl said to Naya. Her voice was soft but clear in the quiet night. "What's she like?" Naya smiled, the expression transforming her face. "Ayanna, she's stubborn, more stubborn than me, which is saying something. When we were children, she once sat in a tree for 2 whole days because our mother told her she couldn't climb it." Pearl giggled. The sound was so unexpected, so joyful, that Garrett felt his chest constrict. When had he last heard his daughter laugh? "She sounds brave," Pearl said. "She is. Too brave sometimes. That's how she got in trouble." Naya's smile faded. "Our father used to say she had the heart of a warrior and the sense of a rabbit, always running toward danger instead of away from it." "Like my mama," Pearl whispered. "Mama always helped people, even when it was dangerous." Naya reached over and took Pearl's hand. "Your mama was the bravest person I never met. What she did trying to save my sister, knowing they might kill her for it. That's real courage. Do you think she was scared when they took her?" The question hung in the cold air. Garrett held his breath, waiting for Naya's answer. He'd wondered the same thing countless times. Had Ruby been terrified in those last moments? Had she called for him? For Pearl? "I think she was scared," Naya said honestly. "But being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Brave means you do the right thing even when you're terrified. Your mama did that. She saved Ayanna even though she knew it might cost her everything." Pearl nodded slowly, processing this. "I want to be brave like her." "You already are." "You're here, aren't you? Helping us find the truth? That's brave." Garrett squeezed his daughter's shoulder. She leaned into him, and for a moment they were just a father and daughter under the stars, holding on to each other against the cold and the fear and the terrible weight of what they were trying to do. Tobias stood watch while the others tried to sleep. Garrett dozed fitfully, his dreams full of Ruby's face. In the dream she was trying to tell him something, but he couldn't hear her words. She kept pointing behind him, urgency in her eyes, but when he turned, there was nothing there. He woke to Tobias, shaking his shoulder. "We got company." Garrett was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "We're south. 2 riders, maybe 3, hanging back about a mile, been following us since we left the ranch." Naya was already awake, checking her weapons. She'd recovered a knife and a small pistol from May's collection before they left. "How long have they been there?" "Hard to say. Spotted them 20 minutes ago when the moon came out from behind the clouds." Tobias's face was grim. "Could have been following longer." "They know where we're going," Naya said. "They'll let us find Ayanna, then take us all at once. Or they're waiting for reinforcements." Garrett scanned the darkness, seeing nothing but shadows. "Either way, we need to move. Now." They broke camp, quickly mounting in silence. Pearl's face was pale but determined. She'd heard everything and understood the danger. She was Ruby's daughter, after all, brave even when terrified. They pushed the horses harder, now urgency overriding caution. The landscape changed as they climbed higher into the hills. Ponderosa pines appeared, their scent sharp in the cold air. Rock formations grew larger, more dramatic. And behind them, always behind them, the followers kept pace. Dawn broke gray and cold, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. Snow began to fall light at first, then heavier. The flakes caught in Pearl's hair and the horses' manes, melting and refreezing. "There," Naya pointed ahead. "Thunder Cave." Garrett saw it, a massive opening in the cliff face like the mouth of some ancient god. The entrance was at least 30 feet high, shadowed and forbidding. Centuries of Apache had used this place for ceremonies, for shelter, for hiding from enemies. Now it would either be their salvation or their tomb. They dismounted at the cave entrance, leading the horses inside. The space opened up immediately, a vast cavern that disappeared into darkness. Somewhere deep within, water dripped with rhythmic persistence. The sound echoed, making it impossible to determine distance or direction. "Stay close," Naya warned. "These caves go for miles. People have gotten lost in here and never found their way out." She led them deeper, following marks on the walls that Garrett couldn't see, but Naya seemed to read like a book. Ancient petroglyphs mixed with newer signs, arrows scratched into stone, symbols that meant something in Apache tradition. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. The cave twisted and turned, split into multiple passages, rose and fell in elevation. Pearl stayed close to Garrett, her hand gripping his coat. Then Naya stopped. Ahead, firelight flickered. "Someone's here," Tobias whispered, raising his rifle. They approached carefully. The passage opened into a large chamber, maybe 50 feet across. A fire burned in a ring of stones, but it was old, dying down to coals. Around it, evidence of recent habitation, blankets, food supplies, a makeshift desk made from flat rocks. But no Ayanna. Naya rushed forward, calling her sister's name. The echo came back to them. "Ayanna, Ayanna, Ayanna." Each repetition fainter, more desperate. No answer. Garrett examined the camp while Naya searched frantically. The fire was maybe 4 hours old. The blankets were neatly folded, not thrown aside in panic. A cup of water sat on the stone desk, still liquid, not frozen. "She was here recently," he said. "And she left in a hurry, but not in panic." Tobias was looking at the ground near the chamber entrance. "Struggle here. See the scuff marks someone fought. But there's no blood." "They took her alive." Naya's voice was hollow. "They finally caught her." Or she ran again. Garrett moved to the stone desk. On it lay papers carefully organized. Documents, letters, a ledger book. She left these behind. Why would she do that? Naya joined him, her hands shaking as she picked up the top document. Her eyes widened. "This is it. This is the proof." Garrett looked over her shoulder. Railroad Company letterhead. A contract dated April 1881. It detailed the purchase of 3,000 acres of land from the Apache Nation for the sum of $500. The signatures at the bottom were neat and official-looking, except the Apache signatures were forgeries. Garrett could tell even without knowing the language. The handwriting was too similar, too perfect. Real signatures had variation personality. These were copied, traced. "Look at this one," Naya said, pulling out another document. A letter from Wallace Drummond to someone named Senator Blackwell. The contents were damning. "Senator, the Apache problem in Prescott Valley has been resolved per our discussion. The families refusing relocation have been dealt with. No witnesses remain. The land is now available for purchase at the previously agreed-upon terms. Our arrangement regarding your support for the railroad expansion bill remains in place." The date on the letter was June 1879, 1 month after Naya's family was killed. "He's admitting to murder," Garrett breathed. "Right here in writing, he's admitting it. Politicians think they're untouchable." Naya's voice was bitter. "They write things down because they never imagine facing consequences." Pearl had been quiet, exploring the edges of the chamber. Now she called out, "Papa, look!" She was standing beside a metal box, partially hidden behind rocks. Garrett and Naya joined her. The box was locked, but Tobias made quick work of it with his knife. Inside were more documents, land deeds, surveys, legal paperwork, and underneath it all, a leather-bound journal. Naya lifted it with reverence. Ayanna's diary. She opened it to the first page. Ayanna's handwriting was neat and precise, each letter carefully formed. The entry was dated 3 years ago, 2 days after Ruby died. "The white woman is dead, the one who tried to help us. Her name was Ruby Finch. She had a husband and a small daughter. The men threw her off the cliff while the deputy watched. I should have saved her. I should have done something. But I was afraid. I am always afraid. No more. I will not run any more. I will gather proof. I will make them pay. For Ruby, for my parents, for everyone they've destroyed." Garrett's vision blurred. He turned away, not wanting the others to see his face. Ruby had died 3 years ago, but reading these words made it fresh again. Made it real in a way it hadn't been when it was just an abstract tragedy. "There's more," Naya said, flipping through pages. She documented everything. Every piece of evidence she found, every witness she interviewed, every close call when they almost caught her. She turned to a page marked with a ribbon, recent entries from just days ago. "The newspaper editor is dead. They killed him before he could publish. I can't trust anyone in authority. But I have an idea. Ruby's husband, Garrett Finch, he deserves to know the truth. And if my sister finds me, she deserves to know what happened to our family. I'm leaving a map at the barn. If they're meant to find this evidence, they will. If not, at least, I tried to do something right before the end." The entry stopped there. No date for what came after, just blank pages. Pearl picked up something from the bottom of the box, a folded piece of paper separate from the others. She opened it carefully. "It's for me," Garrett read over her shoulder. The handwriting was different from Ayanna's, familiar. His heart stopped. It was Ruby's handwriting. "My darling Pearl," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I tried to be careful. I tried to protect you and your papa. But some things are bigger than being safe. Some things are worth dying for." Garrett's hand shook as he took the letter from Pearl. He read aloud, his voice breaking. "I know you're probably angry with me. You have every right to be. I left you. I wasn't there to see you grow up to teach you all the things mothers teach daughters. But I need you to understand why I did this. I met a woman named Ayanna. She was hurt, scared, running for her life. And when she told me what happened to her family, what the railroad did to her people, I knew I had to help. Because that's what we do, Pearl. We help people who need it, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Pearl was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Garrett pulled her close as he continued reading. "Your papa is a good man, the best man I've ever known. He'll take care of you. He'll keep you safe. But Pearl, I need you to do something for me. I need you to be brave. If Ayanna or her sister ever finds you, if they bring you this letter, it means they need help. Help them, baby girl. Finish what I started. Tell the truth even when no one wants to hear it. That's how we change the world, one truth at a time." The letter was signed, "Your mama who loves you more than all the stars in the sky." The chamber fell silent, except for Pearl's quiet sobbing. Garrett held his daughter, his own tears falling into her hair. Naya turned away, giving them privacy, but her shoulders shook with her own grief. Tobias stood guard at the chamber entrance, his face carved from stone. But his eyes were wet too. Finally Pearl pulled back. She wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at Naya. "Mama wanted me to help you, so that's what I'm going to do." Before anyone could respond, Tobias hissed, "Someone's coming." They moved instantly. Garrett grabbed the documents, shoving them into his saddlebag. Naya took the journal. Pearl carefully folded her mother's letter and tucked it inside her coat next to her heart. They retreated deeper into the cave, following Naya's lead. Behind them, voices echoed. Men's voices, at least 5, maybe more. "Fan out," someone commanded. "They're in here somewhere, find them." Silas Crane. Garrett recognized the voice from town. The man was a known gun-for-hire, ex-Confederate raider turned mercenary. If Crane was here, it meant the railroad wasn't playing games anymore. They moved through the darkness, trying to be silent, but the cave betrayed them. Every footstep echoed. Every breath sounded loud as thunder. "I hear something," another voice called. "Southeast passage." Gunfire erupted. Bullets ricocheted off stone walls, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Garrett pushed Pearl down, covering her body with his own. Naya and Tobias returned fire, their muzzle flashes bright in the darkness. "This way," Naya shouted, pulling them down a side passage. They ran. The passage narrowed, forcing them to move single file. Pearl went first, small enough to navigate easily. Then Naya, then Garrett, then Tobias bringing up the rear. More gunfire. Tobias grunted, stumbled. "Keep going," he yelled. "I'll slow them down." "Tobias, no." Garrett tried to turn back, but the passage was too narrow. "Go, get the girl out. Get the evidence to someone who matters." Tobias's voice was strained. He'd been hit. How badly Garrett couldn't tell in the darkness. "Tell my sister I didn't run this time." The passage opened into another chamber. Garrett turned, trying to go back for Tobias, but Naya grabbed his arm. "He's buying us time. Don't waste it." "I can't just leave him. He's already dead if we don't get this evidence out." Naya's voice was harsh, but her eyes were understanding. "Honor his sacrifice. Move." Garrett wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but Pearl was there looking up at him with Ruby's eyes holding Ruby's letter against her heart. And he knew what Ruby would say. Protect the girl. Finish the mission. Some things are bigger than being safe. They ran. Behind them, Tobias's gun barked 3 times. Then silence. Then voices shouting, arguing. The passage twisted and turned. Naya navigated by feel, by memory, by instinct. They climbed over rocks, squeezed through gaps barely wide enough for Garrett's shoulders. Pearl never complained, never slowed down. Finally, they saw light ahead. Not the entrance they'd come through, but another opening, smaller, harder to find. They emerged onto a hillside, blinking in the gray daylight. Snow fell heavily now, covering their tracks almost as fast as they made them. "Where are we?" Garrett asked. "North side of the mountain, maybe 2 miles from where we entered." Naya scanned the landscape. "We need to get to cover before they realize we got out. The horses are still in the cave. Then we walk." She set off down the hill, moving fast, despite her injuries. They walked for an hour through deepening snow. Pearl's lips turned blue from cold. Garrett gave her his coat, then his scarf when she started shivering. Naya wrapped her own blanket around the girl, and together they created a cocoon of warmth. The abandoned mission appeared through the snow like a mirage. It had been built by Spanish missionaries 100 years ago, used for 50 years, then abandoned when the Apache Wars made it too dangerous. Now it stood empty, its adobe walls crumbling, its roof partially collapsed. But it had walls, it had shelter, and right now that was everything. They stumbled inside, exhausted and frozen. Garrett immediately started gathering wood for a fire, while Naya checked Pearl for frostbite. The girl's fingers and toes were dangerously cold, but not frozen. They'd made it just in time. The fire crackled to life, and warmth began to seep back into the mission's single intact room. They huddled around it, sharing the last of May's provisions. "Tobias," Pearl said quietly. "Is he really dead?" Garrett thought of his friend. The way he'd stepped up without being asked, the way he'd covered their escape, the way he'd said, "Tell my sister I didn't run this time." "I don't know, honey. I hope not. But he was very brave. He saved us." Pearl nodded, accepting this. Like Mama saved Ayanna. Yes, like that. They sat in silence, listening to the fire pop and the snow fall outside. Naya kept checking the door, waiting for pursuit that hadn't come yet. The evidence sat between them and Garrett's saddlebag worth more than gold, worth more than all their lives combined. As night fell, they heard hoofbeats outside. Garrett grabbed his rifle. Naya positioned herself between Pearl and the door knife drawn. They waited. A single horse approached. The rider dismounted with a heavy thud. Footsteps crunched through snow. Then a voice called out, "Garrett Finch, I know you're in there. I'm alone. I'm not armed. I need to talk." Garrett recognized that voice. His blood turned to ice. "Deputy Marcus Holt." "Get away from here, Holt," Garrett shouted. "I know what you did. I know you watched them kill Ruby." Silence. Then, "I know you know. That's why I'm here. Come to finish the job. Kill me like you killed her." "I didn't kill her," Holt's voice cracked. "God help me, I didn't kill her. But I watched, and that makes me just as guilty." Naya looked at Garrett, confusion in her eyes. This wasn't how confrontations with corrupt lawmen usually went. "What do you want?" Garrett called. "To help, to make it right, if that's even possible." Holt sounded destroyed. "Please, let me in. I have information you need." "It's a trap," Naya whispered. "Maybe. But he sounds—" Garrett trailed off. He didn't know how to explain it. The defeat in Holt's voice, the raw guilt. It didn't sound like an act. "I'm going to open the door," Holt called. "Slow, my hands are up. If you want to shoot me, I understand. I probably deserve it." The door creaked open. Marcus Holt stood in the threshold, hands raised, no weapon visible. Snow covered his shoulders and hat. His face looked 10 years older than the last time Garrett had seen him, and there were tears on his cheeks. "I'm sorry," Holt said. "I'm so goddamn sorry for everything." Garrett kept the rifle aimed at his chest. "Why are you here?" "Because they have my family." Holt's voice broke completely. "My wife, Emma, my son, Lucas. They've had them for 3 years, kept them in a house on Drummond's property. Told me if I didn't do what they said, if I talked to anyone, they'd kill them both." The words hung in the air. Naya's grip on her knife loosened slightly. Pearl peered around Garrett's leg, studying Holt's face. "They made you watch," Pearl said softly. "They made you watch Mama die." Holt's eyes found the little girl, his face crumpled. "Yes, God forgive me, yes. I tried to close my eyes, but Drummond's man held them open, made me watch. Said if I looked away, they'd do the same thing to my Emma." He sank to his knees in the snow. "I've lived with that image every day for 3 years, your Mama's face, the way she looked at me before they threw her. Not angry, just disappointed, like she'd expected better from me." Garrett lowered the rifle slightly. "If this is true, why tell us now? Why risk it?" "Because this morning I got a message from Emma. She managed to smuggle it out through a servant girl Drummond doesn't watch closely." Holt reached slowly into his coat, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "She said Lucas is sick. Really sick, needs a doctor, but Drummond won't let one come. He's using my son's illness as leverage. Told me to bring you and the Apache woman in dead or alive, or Lucas dies." He held out the paper. Garrett took it, read it. The handwriting was shaky but genuine. A mother's desperate plea for her child's life. "I can't do it anymore," Holt said. "I can't let my son die for this. I can't let more innocent people get hurt. I want to testify. Against Drummond. Against all of them. But first I need to get my family out." "And you expect us to help you?" Naya's voice was hard. "After what you did?" "No, I don't expect anything. I'm here to help you first." Holt met her eyes. "I know where Ayanna is." Every muscle in Naya's body went rigid. "What?" "Crane's men took her this morning. Before you arrived at the cave. She's alive, being held at Drummond's ranch outside Prescott, same place they're keeping my family." Holt's voice turned urgent. "But they're moving her tomorrow, taking her to Phoenix to some judge Drummond owns. They'll make her sign documents giving up Apache land rights. Then they'll kill her and make it look like suicide." "Why should we believe you?" Garrett demanded. "Because I'm done lying. Because I'm done being afraid. Because your daughter is standing right there and she looks so much like Ruby that it breaks my heart every time I see her." Holt looked at Pearl. "Your mama told me something right before they took her to the cliff. She said, Marcus being afraid doesn't make you evil. But letting fear stop you from doing what's right, That's when you lose your soul. She was right. I lost my soul 3 years ago. Maybe this is my chance to find it again. The mission fell silent. Snow continued to fall outside, the fire crackled, and everyone waited for Garrett to decide. He looked at Pearl. She was studying Holt with those two old eyes, weighing him, judging him. Finally, she nodded, just once, permission, or maybe forgiveness. Garrett wasn't sure which. He looked at Naya. She was trembling with the need to find her sister, but also with suspicion. "If you're lying," she said to Holt, "if this is a trap, I will kill you myself, slowly." "If I'm lying, I'll help you do it." Holt stood slowly, carefully. "So what do you say? Do we work together, save both our families, and expose these bastards for what they are?" Garrett thought of Ruby, of Tobias, of all the people who died or suffered because of the railroad's greed and men's cowardice. He thought of the evidence in his saddlebag, proof that could bring down senators and railroad executives, proof that could change everything, but only if they lived long enough to use it. "We work together," Garrett said. "But Holt, if you betray us, I won't wait for Naya. I'll kill you myself." "Fair enough." Holt stepped fully inside, closing the door against the storm. "Then we'd better start planning, because Drummond's ranch is a fortress, and we have until tomorrow night to break in, rescue Ayanna and my family, and get out alive." "Impossible odds," Naya muttered. "Yes." Holt almost smiled. But then so was Ruby taking on the railroad alone, and she almost succeeded. Pearl moved to the map Holt spread on the floor. Documents from Ruby, evidence from Ayanna, testimony from a corrupt deputy trying to redeem himself, and a 10-year-old girl who'd carried the truth for 3 years, waiting for someone to believe her. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, they planned. And somewhere in Prescott, in a mansion built on stolen land and soaked in innocent blood, Wallace Drummond had no idea that his carefully constructed empire was about to come crashing down. The night stretched on. Plans were made, revised, thrown out, remade. Holt drew detailed maps of Drummond's property. The main house, the outbuildings, the bunkhouse where guards slept, the small cottage where Emma and Lucas were kept under constant watch. "How many men does he have?" Garrett asked. "At least 20, maybe 30, all armed, all loyal because he pays better than anyone else in the territory." Holt marked positions on the map. "Guards rotate every 4 hours. Weakest point is between midnight and 2 in the morning. That's when they're tired cold, ready for their shift to end." "Still 20 to 4, Naya pointed out. 30 to 4 if they're all there." 3, Pearl corrected quietly. 30 to 3. I'm not staying behind." "Pearl, no." Garrett started to argue, but she cut him off. "Mama didn't stay behind when people needed help. I'm not staying behind either. Besides, I'm small. I can get into places you can't." She was right. Garrett hated it, but she was right. And he could see Ruby and her determination in the set of her jaw. His daughter was going to fight whether he wanted her to or not. Better to have her where he could see her than somewhere else doing something reckless on her own. "Fine," he said. "But you stay with me at all times. You don't take risks. You don't be a hero." Pearl nodded, but they both knew she was lying. Holt continued the briefing. "Ayanna's being kept in the cellar. Stone walls, one entrance, always guarded. Getting to her will be the hard part. Getting out again will be harder." "What about your family?" "The cottage is on the east side of the property. 2 guards outside, 1 inside, with Emma and Lucas." Holt's voice softened. "If we can get them out first, they can help create a distraction while we go for Ayanna." "Or," Naya said, "we split up. 2 of us go for Ayanna, 2 for your family." "Splitting up is how people die," Garrett objected. "Staying together is how we all get caught." Naya met his eyes. "We need to move fast, hit multiple targets at once. Keep them confused, off balance." She was right, too. Garrett was surrounded by right people, all suggesting dangerous things. They argued strategy for another hour. Eventually, a plan emerged. Risky, probably suicidal, but possible. Maybe. Holt would go in first alone. His presence wouldn't raise suspicion. He'd create an opening, a moment of confusion. In that moment, Garrett and Pearl would go for Emma and Lucas. Naya would go for Ayanna. "And if it goes wrong?" Pearl asked. The adults exchanged glances. Nobody wanted to answer that. "If it goes wrong," Holt said finally, "you run. You take the evidence and you run. Get it to someone who can use it. A federal marshal, a newspaper, someone. Don't let what Ruby died for, what your friend Tobias died for, don't let it be for nothing." "Tobias might not be dead," Pearl insisted. "You're right. I hope he's not." Holt's voice was gentle. "But hoping doesn't change our plan. We go in tomorrow night. We get everyone out. And then we burn Drummond's empire to the ground." As they finalized details, Nia pulled Garrett aside. "You trust him, really?" Garrett looked at Holt, who was showing Pearl on the map where the cottage was, teaching her the layout in case they got separated. The deputy's hands shook slightly, whether from cold or fear or guilt, Garrett couldn't tell. "I trust that he loves his family," Garrett said. "I trust that he's drowning in guilt. I trust that he wants a chance at redemption. Whether that's enough to make him trustworthy, I don't know, but we don't have a lot of options. And if he betrays us, then Pearl knows to run, and we die knowing we tried." Garrett met her eyes. "Same as Ruby, same as Tobias, same as everyone else who stood up to these people." Nia nodded slowly. "Your wife. She really was something special, wasn't she?" "Yeah, she was." Garrett felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I just wish I'd known it while she was alive. Really known it, not taken it for granted." "You know it now. That counts for something." Did it? Garrett wasn't sure. But he didn't have time to dwell on it. They had one day to rest, prepare, and get ready for a fight that would either free the innocent or kill them all. Pearl fell asleep against Garrett's shoulder, exhausted from everything. Holt took first watch, sitting by the door with his rifle. Nia tended to her wounds, changing bandages by firelight. Garrett sat holding his daughter and thinking about Ruby, about the letter she'd left, about how she'd known she might die and done it anyway, about courage and sacrifice and the terrible cost of doing what was right. Tomorrow they'd raid Drummond's ranch. Tomorrow they'd face impossible odds. Tomorrow they'd either rescue Ayanna and Holt's family or die trying. But tonight, in this abandoned mission with snow falling outside, they had a plan. They had hope. And they had each other. It would have to be enough. As Garrett drifted toward sleep, he could almost hear Ruby's voice. "That's my girl. That's my brave girl. Show them what we're made of." He held Pearl tighter and whispered into the darkness, "We will, Ruby. I promise we will." Outside, the storm finally began to break, and in the distance, barely visible through the snow, the lights of Prescott twinkled. Somewhere in that town, Wallace Drummond slept soundly in his mansion, convinced his secrets were safe. He had no idea the reckoning was coming. Dawn came, cold and merciless. Garrett woke to find Pearl already awake, sitting by the dying fire, staring at her mother's letter. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases, threatening to tear. But she held it carefully, reverently, like the sacred thing it was. "Morning, baby girl," Garrett said softly. Pearl looked up. Her eyes were dry but determined. "Today we finish it. For Mama." "For Mama," he agreed. Holt was outside checking the perimeter. He came in stamping snow from his boots, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Storm's past. Roads will be clear by afternoon. That's good and bad. Good because we can move faster. Bad because so can reinforcements if things go wrong." Nia was already awake, stretching her injured side carefully. The stitches had held through everything, but Garrett could see pain in the tightness around her eyes. She caught him looking and straightened, refusing to show weakness. They ate a cold breakfast of dried meat and hard biscuit. Nobody talked much. There wasn't much to say. They all knew what was coming. The plan was simple because complicated plans fell apart under pressure. Get in. Get Ayanna and Holt's family. Get out. Use the evidence to destroy Drummond. Simple. Suicidal. But necessary. As they prepared to leave, hoofbeats approached. Multiple horses. Garrett grabbed his rifle, positioning himself between Pearl and the door. Nia drew her knife. Holt raised his hands, ready to talk his way out if it came to that. The door burst open. Tobias Gray stood there, blood-soaked and barely standing. Behind him, two women on horseback. One was May Wong, Garrett's housekeeper, her face set with grim determination. The other was a stranger, tall and regal, despite obvious exhaustion and fear. "Tobias!" Garrett rushed forward, catching his friend as he stumbled. "Told you I didn't run," Tobias said through gritted teeth. Blood seeped from a shoulder wound. "Got two of them before the rest decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Crawled out a back passage. May found me on the road to the ranch. You should be dead, Naya said, already checking his wound. Probably, too stubborn to notice. Tobias looked past her to the tall woman. But I brought you something. Someone? The woman dismounted with fluid grace despite her bound hands. May had tied her wrists, taking no chances. She was Apache, maybe 26 years old, with eyes that held 3 years of running and fighting and surviving against impossible odds. Ayanna, Naya breathed. The sisters stared at each other across the small room. 3 years since they'd seen each other. 3 years of searching and hiding and hoping. Then they were in each other's arms, both crying, both speaking rapid Apache that Garrett couldn't follow, but understood in his bones. The language of family reunited, of grief shared, of love that survived everything the world threw at it. May cleared her throat. Found her on the road. She was heading this way, said she escaped from Drummond's ranch last night. Had these? May held up Ayanna's bound hands. Sorry for the rope, but I didn't know if it was a trap. It's not, Ayanna said in perfect English, her accent slight. She turned to Garrett, her eyes finding Pearl. Recognition flashed across her face. You have Ruby's eyes, you're her daughter. Pearl nodded, unable to speak. Ayanna knelt despite her bound hands, bringing herself to Pearl's height. Your mother saved my life. I've spent 3 years trying to honor that sacrifice, trying to make sure her death meant something. Tears streaked her face. I'm so sorry I couldn't save her. I'm so sorry you lost her because of me. Pearl reached out and touched Ayanna's face, a gesture so gentle it broke Garrett's heart. Mama chose to help you. That wasn't your fault. That was her being brave. Ayanna closed her eyes, fresh tears falling. She was the bravest person I ever met. Until now, Pearl said. Now it's us, all of us, being brave together. Holt cut Ayanna's bonds with his knife. If you escape, they'll be looking for you. We need to move fast. They're already looking. Ayanna rubbed her wrists. But I made sure they'd look in the wrong direction. I left a trail heading east toward the border. By the time they realize it's false, we'll have what we need. Which is? Garrett asked. Ayanna smiled, and it was fierce. Everything. I didn't just escape. I broke into Drummond's office first. Took documents he thought were locked safe. Contracts, letters, a ledger showing every bribe he's paid to every official in the territory. She pulled a leather satchel from under her coat. This is everything. Every crime, every murder, every stolen piece of land. All of it documented in his own hand. The room fell silent. Naya took the satchel with shaking hands, opened it, pulled out papers. Her eyes widened as she read. This is more than we had in the cave. This is everything. There's more, Ayanna said. Drummond is planning something. Today. There's a winter festival in Prescott starting this afternoon. He's using it as cover to meet with Senator Blackwell. They're signing final documents transferring all remaining Apache land to railroad ownership. Once those papers are signed and filed, it becomes legal, irreversible. When? Garrett demanded. Sunset, at the festival, in front of witnesses to make it look legitimate. A public ceremony celebrating progress and partnership between the railroad and the territory. Ayanna's voice dripped contempt. He's turning genocide into a party. Holt was already thinking his lawman's mind working. The festival, hundreds of people, witnesses everywhere. If we expose him there publicly, he can't make it disappear, can't kill everyone who saw. Exactly. Ayanna met his eyes. That's why I was coming to find you, my sister, Ruby's family, the deputy who's been helping Drummond. I figured one of you would know what to do with this evidence. Wait, Holt said. You know who I am. I've been watching Drummond's operation for 3 years. I know everyone who works for him, including the deputy whose family he's been holding hostage. She studied Holt with eyes that saw everything. You were at the barn, the night Ruby died. You watched. Holt flinched like he'd been struck. Yes. But you didn't pull the trigger, and according to conversations I overheard, you've been looking for a way to free your family without getting them killed. Ayanna's voice softened slightly. That's why I'm giving you a chance now. Help us stop Drummond, save your family and mine, or stay a coward and watch more people die. The words hung harsh and true. Holt nodded slowly. I'll help. I'm already in this. Might as well finish it. Good. Ayanna turned to Garrett. You're Ruby's husband. She talked about you, said you were a good man who deserved better than what she was putting you through. Garrett's throat tightened. She never put me through anything. I just wish I'd known. Wish I could have helped. You're helping now. That's what matters." Ayanna looked at Pearl again. "And you're braver than your mother ever knew you could be." Pearl straightened. "I'm ready. Tell me what we need to do." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Ayanna's inside knowledge, combined with Holt's understanding of Prescott's layout, gave them advantages they hadn't had before. May contributed her own observations. She'd lived in Prescott for 30 years, everyone knew which merchants could be trusted and which were in Drummond's pocket. Ruth Mackenzie, May said. She runs the newspaper. She's been trying to expose the railroad for years, but never had proof. Give her this evidence, she'll print it before Drummond can stop her. "Can we trust her?" Naya asked. "She was Ruby's best friend." May's voice was certain. "Ruby used to help her set type at the press. If anyone will risk everything to honor Ruby's memory, it's Ruth." The plan came together piece by piece. They would split into 3 groups. May and Tobias, despite his injury, would go to Ruth Mackenzie with copies of the most damning evidence. Get it printed and distributed before the ceremony. Holt would use his position as deputy to get close to Drummond during the festival. He'd rescue his family while everyone was distracted by the ceremony. Garrett, Pearl, Naya, and Ayanna would attend the festival as ordinary citizens. When Drummond started his ceremony, they'd confront him publicly, with the evidence, with witnesses, with the truth Ruby had died protecting. "It's going to be dangerous," Garrett warned Pearl one more time. "Everything worth doing is dangerous," she replied. "Mama taught me that." She had, by example if not by words. They rode into Prescott as the sun climbed toward noon. The town was already buzzing with festival preparations. Merchants set up stalls selling food and trinkets. Musicians tuned instruments. Children ran through the streets excited by the break from routine. Nobody looked at them twice. Just another rancher with his daughter, a couple of Apache women, and a deputy going about his business. Ordinary, unremarkable, exactly what they needed to be. May and Tobias split off toward the newspaper office. Holt headed toward the sheriff's station to maintain his cover. That left Garrett, Pearl, and the sisters to blend into the festival crowd. There, Ayanna pointed to a platform being constructed in the town square. "That's where the ceremony will happen. See the railroad banner. Drummond spares no expense for his propaganda." Red and gold fabric hung from poles proclaiming "Progress through partnership" and "Building tomorrow together." Words that sounded noble if you didn't know they were built on corpses and lies. They positioned themselves strategically, close enough to reach the platform quickly, far enough to not draw attention. Pearl bought roasted chestnuts from a vendor playing the part of an excited child, but her eyes never stopped watching, cataloging escape routes and danger points. Ruby's daughter, indeed. An hour passed, then 2. The sun slid toward the western horizon. The crowd grew. Garrett estimated 300 people now, maybe more. Families, children, ordinary folks who had no idea they were about to witness either justice or massacre. Then Wallace Drummond arrived. He came in a carriage drawn by matched black horses, expensive and ostentatious. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Garrett's ranch. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His smile was warm and welcoming. He looked like exactly what he pretended to be, a successful businessman bringing prosperity to the territory. Not a murderer, not a thief, not the man who'd ordered Ruby thrown off a cliff. Beside him in the carriage sat Senator Blackwell, older, fatter, wearing his corruption like a badge of honor. The 2 men climbed onto the platform, waving to the crowd like visiting royalty. "Friends," Drummond's voice carried across the square, "thank you for joining us on this historic day. Today we celebrate the future. Today we sign an agreement that will bring prosperity to everyone in Prescott Valley." Garrett felt Pearl tense beside him. Naya's hand went to the knife hidden under her coat. Ayanna stood perfectly still, but Garrett could see the rage burning in her eyes. Not yet. They had to wait for the right moment. When the crowd was fully engaged, when Drummond was committed to his performance, when backing out would be impossible. Drummond continued his speech, words flowing like honey laced with poison. He talked about progress and civilization, about taming the wilderness and building the future. He never mentioned the Apache families murdered for their land, never mentioned the forged documents or the bribed officials, or the witnesses silenced permanently. And now, Drummond gestured grandly, I'm pleased to announce that we've reached an agreement with the remaining Apache landholders, a fair agreement, a generous agreement, one that honors their heritage while allowing progress to continue. He pulled out a document. Ayanna sucked in a breath. That's the land transfer, the one I was supposed to sign before I escaped. But that's not my signature. They forged it. Perfect, Naya whispered. They just committed fraud in front of 300 witnesses. Senator Blackwell took the document, made a show of reading it, then signed with a flourish. On behalf of the United States government, I approve this transfer of land. May it stand as an example of peaceful cooperation between all peoples of this great territory. The crowd applauded. They had no reason not to. It all sounded so civilized, so proper, so legal. That's when Garrett stepped forward. Stop! He shouted, his voice cutting through the applause. That document is a forgery, and that man is a murderer. The crowd went silent. Every eye turned to him. Drummond's smile froze, then twisted into something uglier. Sir, I don't know who you are, but these are serious accusations. Perhaps you've had too much to drink. Drummond's tone was patronizing, dismissive, designed to make Garrett look like a fool. I'm Garrett Finch, and I'm completely sober. Garrett pushed through the crowd toward the platform, Pearl at his side. 3 years ago, you had my wife murdered because she was helping the Apache people you've been stealing from. You had her thrown off a cliff and made it look like an accident. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, some curious. Drummond's expression stayed calm, but his eyes went cold. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Finch, but I had nothing to do with your wife's death. You're clearly delusional from grief. Am I? Garrett reached into his coat. Then how do you explain this? He pulled out the letter from Drummond to Senator Blackwell, the one Ayanna had found in the cave. He read aloud, his voice carrying. Senator, the Apache problem in Prescott Valley has been resolved per our discussion. The families refusing relocation have been dealt with. No witnesses remain. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Drummond's jaw tightened. That document is clearly fabricated. Anyone could write a letter and claim it's from me. Could anyone forge your handwriting this perfectly? Naya stepped forward, holding up more letters, more contracts, all in Drummond's distinctive script. Could anyone fake your personal seal, the one you use on all your railroad documents? She held them high so the crowd could see. People pressed closer, trying to read, trying to understand. Senator Blackwell started backing toward his carriage. I had no knowledge of any of this. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Ayanna climbed onto the platform before anyone could stop her. She faced Drummond directly, no fear in her eyes. My name is Ayanna Taza. I'm the woman whose signature you forged on that land transfer document. The woman you've been hunting for 3 years because I witnessed you murder Red Bear during what was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation. Gasps from the crowd. Drummond's hand moved toward his coat, toward the gun Garrett knew he carried. Don't, Holt's voice rang out. The deputy pushed through the crowd, his own gun drawn and aimed at Drummond. It's over, Wallace. I'm done protecting you. Done watching you destroy lives. Drummond stared at his bought lawman with pure hatred. You'll regret this. Your family will regret this. No. Holt smiled, and it was genuine. They won't. Because while you were up here giving speeches, I was getting them out. Emma and Lucas are safe now. With the federal marshal who rode in from Phoenix this morning. The one who's very interested in reading all these documents. As if summoned, a tall man in a marshal's badge stepped forward. Wallace Drummond, you're under arrest for fraud, murder, conspiracy, and about 15 other crimes I'll add once I finish reading this evidence. Drummond's face went from confident to desperate in seconds. He pulled his gun, grabbed Pearl before Garrett could react, held her in front of him like a shield. Nobody moves, Drummond snarled, or the girl dies. The crowd scattered, screaming. Garrett's world narrowed to his daughter's face. She looked terrified but also angry. Her hand moved slowly toward her coat pocket, toward the small derringer May had given her, the one that had belonged to Ruby. Let her go, Drummond, Garrett said, trying to keep his voice steady. This is over. You've lost. I haven't lost anything. Drummond backed toward his carriage, dragging Pearl with him. I'll take the girl. You'll let me leave, or I'll kill her right here like I killed her mother. That was his mistake, admitting it, confirming what everyone suspected. Pearl didn't hesitate. She pulled the derringer, twisted in Drummond's grip, and fired point-blank into his leg. Drummond screamed, his hold loosening. Garrett lunged forward, ripping his daughter away. Holt and the marshal tackled Drummond before he could recover. Pearl stood there, gun still smoking, looking at the man who'd killed her mother. "That was for Mama," she said quietly. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some stood in shock, but everyone had seen, everyone knew. The truth was out, impossible to suppress. Movement at the edge of the square caught Garrett's eye. Silas Crane and 3 of his men pushing through the crowd, guns drawn, coming to save their employer or die trying. "Naya!" Garrett shouted, but she'd already seen them. She moved like water, like wind, like everything her father had taught her. The knife in her hand flashed. The first man went down, clutching his throat. The second took a blade to the chest. Ayanna fought beside her sister, the 2 of them moving in perfect synchronization. Years apart hadn't dulled their bond. If anything, it had strengthened it. Silas Crane raised his gun at Naya's back. Garrett shot him. The bullet took Crane in the shoulder, spinning him around. He tried to raise his gun again. Naya was faster. Her final knife, the one she'd been saving, buried itself in Crane's heart. He looked surprised more than anything. Surprised that he could be beaten. Surprised that he was dying. He fell without ceremony, without last words. Just another evil man receiving justice he'd avoided too long. The remaining gunmen saw their leader fall and ran. The marshal's deputies, who'd been positioned throughout the crowd, gave chase. But it was over. Really over. Drummond lay on the platform, bleeding from his leg wound, handcuffed and defeated. Senator Blackwell had been caught trying to sneak away and was now also in custody. The documents were safe. The witnesses had seen everything. Justice, imperfect and messy and bought with too much blood, had finally arrived. That evening, as the sun set over Prescott, Ruth Mackenzie's newspaper hit the streets. Special edition, 500 copies, just like she'd promised May. The headline screamed, "Railroad Empire Built on Murder." Below it, photographs of documents, names of the dead, testimonies from survivors. By morning, copies would reach Phoenix, Tucson, Santa Fe. By next week, the entire territory would know. The railroad would be investigated. Officials would be removed. Lives wouldn't be restored, but at least the dying would stop. Garrett stood outside the sheriff's office where Drummond and Blackwell were being held pending trial. Pearl sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. Inside, Holt was giving his full confession to the federal marshal. Every detail, every crime he'd witnessed, every order he'd followed out of fear. "Will they hang him?" Pearl asked quietly. "Deputy Holt? I don't know. Maybe. He was an accomplice to murder. That usually means hanging." Garrett pulled her closer. "But he also helped stop it, saved lives. That should count for something. Mama would want mercy for him. He was scared. Scared people do bad things sometimes, but that doesn't make them bad people." Garrett looked at his daughter, 10 years old and wiser than most adults. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher." Pearl touched the letter tucked inside her coat. Always there, always close to her heart. The door opened. Holt emerged, his hands in irons, 2 deputies flanking him, but his face looked lighter than Garrett had ever seen it. The burden of guilt finally lifted, even if punishment awaited. He stopped in front of Pearl. "I'm sorry. For everything. For not being brave enough when it mattered. For all the years your mama wasn't here because I was too afraid to do what was right." Pearl stood. She walked to him, this man who'd watched her mother die, and did something Garrett didn't expect. She hugged him. "Mama forgave you before she died," Pearl said. "I heard her say it. When I was hiding behind the tree, after they'd already hurt her, after they told you to watch. She looked at you and said, 'It's okay, Marcus. I forgive you. Take care of your family.' I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Holt broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face. "I don't deserve that. I don't deserve any of this." "Maybe not," Pearl agreed. "But you're getting it anyway. That's what mercy is." The deputies led Holt away to the jail. His trial would come later. His punishment would be decided by judges and juries. But at least he'd go knowing one thing. Ruby Finch, in her final moments, with every reason to hate him, had chosen forgiveness instead. That was the kind of person she'd been. That was the legacy she'd left. 3 months later, spring came to Arizona Territory like a benediction. Snowmelt fed the creeks and rivers. Wildflowers bloomed across the valley. And on the land that had been stolen from the Apache people, families began returning to rebuild. The federal government, embarrassed by the scandal and facing pressure from newspapers across the nation, honored the 1878 treaty. Land was returned. Reparations were promised, though few believed the promises would be kept. But it was a start. Drummond had been sentenced to hang. Senator Blackwell faced prison and political ruin. 13 other officials resigned or were removed. The railroad's expansion plans were halted pending full investigation of all their land acquisitions. It wouldn't bring back the dead. Nothing could, but at least the killing had stopped. Holt received 10 years in territorial prison for his role as accomplice. Less than he deserved, more than he'd hoped for. His wife Emma and son Lucas visited him monthly, and in the letters he wrote to Garrett delivered by Emma, there was something approaching peace. Tobias recovered from his wounds. The bullet had missed anything vital, though May said it was pure luck mixed with Tobias's stubbornness. He'd gone to visit his sister for the first time in 5 years, finally able to face her, knowing he hadn't run when it mattered most. At Copper Ridge Ranch, life found a new rhythm. Naya and Ayanna had stayed through the winter helping with the ranch work. Initially, it was temporary, just until they figured out what to do next. But temporary had stretched into weeks, then months, and nobody talked about them leaving anymore. Pearl thrived with the sisters around. She learned Apache words, Apache stories, Apache ways of seeing the world. She taught them English literature, mathematics, how to play the piano Ruby had loved. They became a family in the way families sometimes form, not through blood, but through shared loss and shared hope. One evening in April, Garrett found himself sitting on the porch with Naya. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, Ayanna was teaching Pearl to shoot a bow. The girl's form was terrible, but her determination was absolute. "She's good with her," Garrett said, watching his daughter. Ayanna always wanted children. Thought she'd have them with the man she was supposed to marry before everything burned. Naya's voice was soft. Now maybe she'll get a different version of that dream. They sat in comfortable silence. Over the months, Garrett had grown used to Naya's presence. The way she moved through the ranch with quiet competence. The way she understood grief without trying to fix it. The way she looked at Pearl with protective affection that reminded him of Ruby. "I've been thinking," Naya said finally, "about staying. Permanently. If you'll have us." Garrett's heart jumped, but he kept his voice steady. The ranch could use the help, and Pearl would be devastated if you left. Just Pearl. He turned to look at her, really look at her. 3 months of working side by side. 3 months of shared meals and shared silences. 3 months of something growing between them that neither had acknowledged. "Not just Pearl," he admitted. Naya smiled. "Good. Because in my culture, when people work together to build something, when they share grief and joy and daily life, that's already family. We don't need ceremonies or papers to make it real. We just need to choose it. And you're choosing this ranch, this life us. I'm choosing Pearl, who reminds me every day that courage comes in small packages. I'm choosing Ayanna, who needs a home after 3 years of running. I'm choosing the memory of a woman I never met, but who died trying to save my sister." She paused. "And I'm choosing you, Garrett Finch, if you'll choose me back." It wasn't a traditional proposal. It wasn't even clear if it was a proposal at all. But Garrett understood the weight of it, the promise behind the words. "I choose you," he said. "All of you, for however long you want to stay." Then it settled. Naya stood, offered her hand. "We're family now, official as we need to be." He took her hand, pulled her closer. They stood together watching Pearl and Ayanna, watching the sun set, watching the ranch stretch out around them like a promise of tomorrow. Inside the house, May was cooking supper. The smell of food drifted through the windows. Pearl's laughter carried on the wind as she finally hit the target, a bale of hay with a painted circle. Ayanna whooped congratulations. This was healing. Not forgetting. Never forgetting. But healing around the wound growing stronger in the broken places. That night at supper, Pearl announced she'd finished writing something. A book, she called it, though it was really just 50 pages of careful handwriting in the journal Ayanna had given her. "It's Mama's story," Pearl explained. Everything that happened, everything she did. So people remember her the right way, not just as someone who died, but as someone who fought. She read the dedication aloud. For Ruby Finch, who taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do what's right even when you are. And for everyone who stands up when it's easier to stay silent, this is your story too. May wiped her eyes. Tobias, visiting for supper, nodded approvingly. Naya and Ayanna held hands across the table, united in grief for a woman they'd lost differently, but completely. Garrett felt his throat tighten. Your mama would be so proud of you. I know, Pearl said simply. I feel her sometimes, watching, making sure we're okay. And I think we finally are. Okay, I mean. She was right. They were okay. Not the same as before. Never the same. Ruby's absence was a permanent ache, a space that couldn't be filled. But around that space life had rebuilt itself. Different, scarred, but whole. 1 year after Drummond's arrest, on the anniversary of the day Garrett found Naya dying by Willow Creek, they held a ceremony. Not at Ruby's grave. She was already honored there. This was different. They gathered at the barn, the place where Ruby had tried to save Ayanna, the place where she'd made the choice that cost her everything and changed all of them. Ayanna had painted a mural on the barn wall, Ruby's face rendered in careful detail from the photograph Garrett had given her. Around Ruby, images of the people she'd touched, Ayanna and Naya, Pearl, Garrett. Even Holt and his family, redeemed by Ruby's final forgiveness. Below the mural, words in both English and Apache. She stood between evil and the innocent. She chose courage over safety. She chose truth over silence. She chose love over fear. Remember her, honor her, be like her. The whole town came. Ruth Mackenzie gave a speech about Ruby's secret work helping the newspaper gather evidence. Doc Patterson talked about Ruby's kindness to everyone who needed healing, regardless of their ability to pay. Families whose lives Ruby had touched in small ways, forgotten until now, shared their stories. Pearl stood before the mural and read from her book. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the gathered crowd. My mama died doing what she believed was right. She knew the cost. She paid it anyway. And because of her sacrifice, families that would have been destroyed were saved. Land that would have been stolen was returned. Truth that would have stayed buried came to light. One woman, one choice, and everything changed. As the sun set, they lit candles, hundreds of them. The light spread across the gathering like stars coming out. In that glow, Garrett saw the faces of everyone Ruby had saved, directly or indirectly, by dying or by inspiring others to be brave. Naya stood beside him, her hand in his, not replacing Ruby. Nobody could do that, but standing with him, choosing him and Pearl in this hard, beautiful, broken life they were building together. Ayanna held Pearl's hand on the other side, the girl who'd lost her mother and the woman who'd lost everything, learning to be family to each other. May and Tobias, Holt's wife Emma, and son Lucas, visiting from where they'd moved to start fresh. Ruth Mackenzie, Doc Patterson. Ordinary people who'd done extraordinary things when the moment demanded it. And in the center of it all, Ruby's face looking down from the barn wall. Forever young, forever brave, forever the woman who'd taught them all what courage really meant. Thank you, Garrett whispered to the image, to the memory, to the ghost he carried in his heart. Thank you for everything. Thank you for Pearl. Thank you for showing me what matters. Thank you for being you. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of spring flowers. And for just a moment, Garrett could swear he heard Ruby's laugh. That bright, joyful sound he'd fallen in love with 14 years ago. The sound that said everything would be all right. That love was worth it. That choosing courage over fear was always, always worth it. The candles burned through the night. And when morning came, they were still there. Hundreds of small flames refusing to go out. Just like Ruby's legacy. Just like the truth she'd died protecting. Just like the family she'd saved without ever knowing it. The girl who knew too much had finally told her story, and in the telling, she'd become immortal. 5 years later, Pearl Finch published her book through a Boston publishing house that specialized in true stories of the Western Territories. The Girl Who Knew Too Much. My mother's sacrifice and the railroad conspiracy became a sensation. Newspapers across the nation picked up the story. Reform movements cited it as an example of corporate corruption. Apache leaders used it to pressure the government for better treatment. It was taught in schools, discussed in churches, debated in legislatures. Ruby Finch, who'd lived quietly and died violently, became famous in death. Not for dying, but for what she'd stood for, the choices she'd made, the example she'd set. Pearl used the book's earnings to establish a school on the returned Apache land, a place where children, both Apache and white, could learn together, where they could be taught by teachers like Ayanna, who understood both cultures and refused to choose between them. She named it Ruby's Hope Academy. The first class had 12 students. By the 10th year, it had over 100. Garrett lived to see his daughter graduate from that school's first class of teachers. Lived to see her marry a young doctor who treated everyone equally, regardless of their heritage. Lived to see his grandchildren born into a world slightly less broken than the one Ruby had left. Naya stood beside him through all of it. They never had a formal wedding, didn't need one. They'd chosen each other through action, through daily partnership, through the quiet building of a life together. That was ceremony enough. On Garrett's 60th birthday, he sat on the porch of Copper Ridge Ranch watching the sunset like he had thousands of times before. Pearl was there, grown and confident. Her children played in the yard. Ayanna was visiting as she did monthly, bringing news from the school. Naya sat beside him, her hair now streaked with gray, her body marked by age and hard work. But her eyes were still fierce, still determined, still choosing him every single day. "We did it," Garrett said quietly. "What Ruby started, we finished it." "We're still finishing it," Naya corrected. "Every day we choose truth over lies. Every day we choose courage over fear. That's how we honor her, not by being done, by continuing." She was right. The fight was never really finished. There would always be powerful men willing to destroy the powerless for profit. Always be injustice to confront. Always be a need for people brave enough to stand up. But because of Ruby, because of Ayanna and Naya, because of Pearl and Holt and Tobias and everyone else who'd chosen courage when it mattered, the fight had a chance. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Garrett opened the old Bible where Ruby used to keep her important papers. Inside, pressed between pages, was her letter to Pearl, the one that had started everything. He read it again, as he had hundreds of times over the years, and he heard her voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside him. Some things are worth dying for, but more importantly, some things are worth living for, worth fighting for, worth building even when the world tries to tear it all down. He closed the book carefully, placed it back on the shelf, and went to bed beside Naya, grateful for the life he'd been given, grateful for the love he'd lost and the love he'd found, grateful for the daughter who'd been brave enough to speak truth when no one wanted to hear it. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had looked down on Ruby's last night, the same stars that would look down on generations yet to come. And somewhere in that vast darkness, Garrett liked to think Ruby was watching, smiling, proud of what they'd built from the ashes of her sacrifice. The girl who knew too much had changed the world, and the world would never forget her. The end.